Welcome to the Nottingham Business School Business Leaders Podcast, where business leaders tell their stories and share their insights. All our guests have a personal connection with Nottingham Business School, so listen, learn, enjoy and share.
Rob Swann joined Nottingham-based manufacturer Termate as a teenage apprentice in 1989. 3 decades later, he now owns the company. In 2007, Rob led a management buyout of the business. Since then, Termate has been on a big export drive to the point where international sales now far outweigh domestic business. In recent years, its electrical insulation products have even been selling well in China. Rob's leadership is passionate and direct. His journey from trainee to MD is compelling. So Rob Swann, welcome to this episode of the Nottingham Business School's Business Leaders Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, as I said there, owner, MD of Termate, you make electrical insulating components. So what does your role involve?
Thankfully now it's much more of a strategic thing, but that's changed over the time. There's no simple fixed point of all of that. So since I became the MD, when the business was in need of a significant change, when I wanted to very much focus on the exporting of the business, because that's where I saw the opportunity to change the business approach, I became the salesperson. I was the sole person who went travelling across the Middle East, Far East, deciding where we could focus our attention, where we thought we'd be able to get the most leverage out of our products. Put the time in then. A lot of time was spent travelling. A lot of time was spent in airports, on planes, in hotels and all of the unpleasant places. Everyone goes, oh, it's so nice to do travelling. It's really not as nice as you'd like it to be. But that was when I really pushed things through. As I got to a point where I started to identify the areas of the Far East and the Middle East, so we focused in Malaysia, Singapore, and we also focused in the UAE. I couldn't do it all as it was developing. So we brought people in, I guided them to the approach we were taking with our sales, and we started bringing on more customers, which was great. And over a bit of time, once customers start to gain our trust, they realise they don't need to spend any time asking us to quote, asking us, have we got the components? They became confident that the components are the same, the quality's right, the pricing's appropriate, and we'd have the stock to be able to support them. And it creates that confidence that people are there.
You know, your hands-on selling. I talk to so many small business leaders who say that an incredibly important part of what they do is selling their product and selling themselves.
It is, but it was. Now, the name, the brand in our industry, people on the street wouldn't know Termate, but within our industry, it's a known brand. And that brand now doesn't need to be sold by me face-to-face. I have very little direct contact with customers directly now. Everything's done through the team. The team do all the day-to-day operations. I'm involved in strategic, so where we're going to be going, the marketing approaches. I still have a great interest in that. So I'm doing that in the background. But from a customer perspective, they don't really see me anymore.
And one of the places that you are going is China, which now is a double-digit part of your business. Usually this operates the other way around, doesn't it? We import from China, but you go out there and export. Tell us about that.
We do, and we've got numbers of customers who are in China, or not just China. We've got the whole of Asia. So we've got India. We've got a large number of customers in India, the Philippines, Vietnam. We spent some time initially really focusing, as I said, in Malaysia and Singapore. Now, some of those people from Singapore gained really confident in our products. We did work very closely with them. And some of those people then, because of COVID, because of other family reasons, moved back to China. And they've taken our product, the confidence with our product, back to them. And because we've always sold our products as being affordable. They're not cheap. We've never tried to claim them to be cheap, but they're affordable. The justification of having that consistency of product has been sufficient for them to be able to persuade their new companies to take on our products as well.
So business is good.
It's very good.
And it's all built on exports.
The growth is predominantly on exports. Thankfully, the UK manufacturing sector in the energy arena has also grown. So our homegrown customers, or those that we've developed over 20, 30 years of working with them, some of those have grown to become massive international companies as well. We've got customers who, some of which they've got manufacturing centres across the world, and I knew them when they were out of almost a shed, slightly bigger than a shed, but they've developed massively as well. And we've gained with that success, we've grown with them because we've supported them through that process as well, coping with them.
Good stuff. So let's go back to the beginning. You started at Termate as a student apprentice in 1989, I think.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So you studied here at Nottingham Business School, or Trent Poly as was. What do you know now that you wish you'd known then?
Oh, probably the fact of I transitioned from being electrical engineering into business and finance at the Poly. So I did electronic engineering before I then came through to the business school. And I remember struggling at the time, but no one really grabbed me and said, don't worry about it being right. And that's the thing that with electronic engineering, it is right, it is wrong. It will work, it won't work. It's simple. There is no grey area. With business, there is such a lot of grey. And only in hindsight, after a long period of time, sometimes you know it is the right decision to have made. And no one really helped me understand how important it is to go with your gut feeling, to be sure about it, be prepared to change your plans should you need to, but you can't look back in hindsight to always be questioning it. Just trust in the action and the process.
Trust the process. I've interviewed two very high-profile bankers on this podcast in the last 2 or 3 months, and both of them were trained engineers from the start. Does that kind of background give you a good grounding for whatever you do?
I think engineering is as a discipline it's very precise. You have to be detailed. You can't get away with bad engineering. It's very notable, and I think it puts a discipline into your work process. We tend to like quite a bit of order, so that tends to kick in. I wouldn't say I'm a pure engineer. I'm certainly not an accredited engineer, and I can talk engineering talk, and I work with engineers, and I understand engineers, but I'm also a business person, and sometimes that will mean I'm a little bit more comfortable to make risks or take risks. And that's where, when I'm working with my fellow directors who are engineers, we work very well collaboratively because they don't like the risk. Right. I'm more comfortable to do it, and we balance one another out, or the three of us balance ourselves out through that process. Right.
So that business background which you talked about in there, in 2007, 18 years after you started with Termate, you led a management buyout. I think the company had been around since the 50s.
Yeah.
But in business terms, you were still relatively young, early 30s.
I was in my early 30s.
Is that daunting for you in leadership terms?
Yeah, I'd had a blessed opportunity. My dad actually owned the business when I joined the business. It wasn't our choice for me to start working there. I wanted to make stuff, and I wanted to be involved in that process, and there weren't other engineering apprenticeship roles available at that time. They were very scarce, and those that were all to do with maintenance engineering. I didn't want to maintain. I wanted to make. I wanted to create things, and reluctantly, I started working for him. He accepted me working for them, and I really did enjoy it. I found that I could develop. I understood the products. It was natural to me. I understood the industry. I spent a lot of time working with customers to understand how our products worked with the customers, and it took a while to get through to that process. So by the time I got to be buying out, it was more a case of I'd seen the opportunities for the big business to an extent diverge from where it was, and my dad's position was he was happy with how it was, and there was an element of disagreement between where we could see the opportunities for the business. And it was clear that one of the easiest ways for me to solve the problem was to go on my own, but not move away from the business. So I bought him out. It had enabled me to have a great opportunity to work with the banks. So the bank who supported me in the process, I'd met. They knew I was the lead on sales at that point. They knew I knew what was my path. So they knew how it was progressing. So it was a nice transition. But the MBO happened. Yeah, I was still quite young. I'd got young kids.
Risk.
A lot of risk. It was a scary amount of money that I had in debt at that period of time, and I felt the burden of that, and the responsibility to my family, the new employees, and the customers. And I don't think always people realise that there is a burden to the customers as well. They rely on us to do our job well. Sure. So if we let them down by not doing our job well, we're letting down so many more people.
So was it better that you took that kind of risk, that kind of leap, not in the dark, but when you were younger, when you were a bit more, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Young.
Just young. We'll leave it at young. So was it actually a benefit?
I worked all the time. There was the opportunity for me to say goodnight to my kids most weekdays. But that was almost it. I worked from early morning through till very late night, pretty much every day of the week, including the weekends. I was then doing the travelling. It was an exhausting period of time, and I was able to do that for a sustained period of time until the business had developed.
And this was the big export drive. You had seen the vision. You had a vision of the future of your business being international business, and so you were able to take it in that direction.
Absolutely, but it wasn't just the sales side, because when the company had to cope with the sales side, so it wasn't just a case of we're going to be able to achieve this. I needed to be able to support the team within the company who were staying at Nottingham, being able to produce the parts. We needed to finance new tooling, finance machinery, consider moving of equipment.
So what's the biggest challenge you faced in that time, perhaps?
The biggest challenge has actually been COVID.
Oh, right. So it was after that.
It was after that. Yeah. It was after that. COVID was the biggest challenge because it was so unknown. So many other things, when there is a global financial crisis, there's some experience of it. Everyone knows that it's going to be terrible, but it's okay. You get over it. With COVID, we knew nothing, and there was very little experience of anyone. You couldn't talk to anybody as a mentor, as a suggestion, anyone to be able to say, "Oh, when we went through that, this is how we would handle it."
As a leader, I guess on reflection, how did you cope?
By being ahead of the curve. I remember it was early stages, because we've got the international customer base we've got international suppliers as well for our materials. We knew what was happening in Singapore, China. We were hearing some of the rumours. Then we had those starting to hear through in Spain and Italy, and we could hear that it was happening. So we went, why don't we start working from home, see if we can get ourselves set up working from home, before there was the call to work from home.
Right.
So we'd actually nearly got everybody in the workforce who could work from home, working from home, before there was the call to work from home.
But you had to stop your manufacturing processes, didn't you?
No, we didn't. No. And that's this whole, that was one of the biggest challenges. Essential working, when we went through the legislation, that was what we were doing literally all the time, reviewing the essential meant you have no choice but to be at a machine to do it. Right. Or it included that. So by manufacturing, to manufacture component parts, you had to be at the machine. So the people who had to be at the machine had no choice but to travel into work to make the component parts. And our component parts go into things which go into hospitals. Mm-hmm. They go into energy provision. They're locations where there is an absolute need for these parts to be there.
Essential.
There is an essential element to them. And I think everyone's got to always appreciate it's not just the PPE to keep something safe. You need to actually have the energy behind the equipment to be able to get that to happen.
But you got through.
We did, yes, very successfully. We got through so successfully that because we'd got measures already in place to protect ourselves for supply chain problems and things like that, there was a huge, I'm not sure if you recall, there was a huge supply chain problem after COVID because so many businesses were disrupted, so many things happened. We weren't disrupted, but a number of our competitors were. And many of those companies who couldn't then purchase the products from the competitors asked us if we could supply. We had the capability, and we've now secured and continued to support those customers post-COVID, post the event. So
by being ahead of the curve, as you put it, light on your feet, thinking it through. Yeah. On reflection, it actually turned out to work out. I
was going to say, I would never want to say in any circumstance that COVID was good. We survived through it, and we've come away without scars. I think is the best way of putting it.
Okay. So on the other, so if that was the biggest challenge, on the flip side, what is your 20 odd years of leadership? What's the thing you're most proud of?
That picking a moment is very difficult because there's individual moments. There's the people who you've seen develop and grow, which is lovely to see. But from a broader spectrum, there was a time when I made a decision that we need to do a big investment to change our product range, and that meant almost our entire product range changing, and that seemed like a huge risk, a huge investment, and there was quite a lot of persuasion that had to take place to get everybody on board.
Convince all your fellow managers and directors?
Absolutely. And there was and it will work. Because coming back to my point earlier, that you don't know it's going to work. You think it's going to work. You think it's the right thing. So we did this big change. And 4 years later, being able to look at it and go, that didn't just work. That absolutely broke the records. It did what we would have liked it to have done. It's expanded our opportunities. Our horizons have broadened because of that change, because of that risk we took. My goodness, it was the right call. But you can only say that after.
In retrospect.
Yeah.
Right. So big decisions like that, which you've just talked through, on reflection, do you think you were always going to be in charge? You're a natural born leader. Is that too overstating it, or?
I'm definitely a very passionate person. I enthuse people. I encourage people. I can get people right.
And is that an important part of leadership?
In my management and leadership style, right. Yes, I think so. People trust that when I go and say, I'm a very honest person. Which gets me into trouble because I say what I shouldn't say. But at least it's out in the open. People know if I'm happy, they know. If I'm unhappy, they definitely know. And I'm passionate. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I push. So would I be in a leadership role? I would either be in a leadership role or I would be a disruptor. I would be in a company that would be a disruptive force or something, because I like opening those cans of worms. I will turn over the stones. I'm curious. And I think curiosity is a hugely valuable thing. I won't walk past the thing that doesn't look right. I will go, that doesn't look right. Why doesn't it look right? Look into it.
Curiosity and authenticity. Those are two words which I think you've just about used there. And they come up in conversations like this all the time.
Yeah. No, curiosity is... There's so many people that said, oh, yeah, I noticed that, but didn't do anything about it. and I can't, my problem is I can't notice it and not do something about it. But I think that from a leadership perspective, encouraging people to be confident to look into it without going, oh, why the heck did you look into that? And for all those people that know me, I would never say heck. There would be a lot of it.
There's a lot more to it than that.
A lot more to it.
But I guess at the front end of that, you have to bite your tongue. So you're not going to say that. You're making sure it comes out in the correct fashion.
Probably not one of my strengths, but that's an area for improvement. Let's put it that way.
Okay, and I guess that feeds nicely into your position on the advisory board for Nottingham Business School. I mean, you coach and you mentor future business leaders. What do you say to these people?
Oh, well, let's talk about two different aspects of that. There's the mentoring side, which is one thing, but also the advisory committee is actually separate to the mentoring. The advisory committee is advising the business school, being part of the business school's approach to what they're wanting to produce as the outcome of the students. And I sit there not only as somebody who's very involved in the business school, but also as a small business owner. So as an SME, you've got a need which is very different to sometimes the corporate organisations, which unquestionably have a huge demand on university grads, but the SMEs are a huge employer if you look at them all collectively. And the difference is that we can't afford as SMEs to have specialists. And there is a unquestionable focus on many academic approaches to focus more and more into specialisms. And that's fine, but we can't afford that as an SME. You need much more generalists or very capable generalists. Without there being the expression jack of all trade, we're wanting people to be very good at generally aspects, and that might be marketing. We can't afford to have a SEO specialist, a content developer, a website host, somebody who can do a podcast. We can't do that. One person has to try to do all of that. So it is very much a case of making sure people understand that if you come up with a good idea, you might actually be the person who follows it through and creates it, produces it, and the outcome is there for you. Right.
And of course, it is small businesses that are the absolute bedrock of this economy, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. Unfortunately, SME is such a huge term as well, from 3 people up to 249 employees. It's a crazily big spectrum. But yeah, it is we focus. We're below 50 employees, but it's a very key thing to try and make sure that there's a good spectrum of people coming through from the universities who can still be employed by people like us.
Sure. So you're a hands-on leader, a passionate leader. You live and breathe your business. But to what extent do you need a hinterland? I mean, leafing through your social media, I see fantastic pictures of you rock climbing across Europe. I mean, which is fascinating. But that must take a bit of thought and time and effort. So you have this balance in your life.
Now I do, and that came in. It was a deliberate step. I think if I hadn't done that, it was just before I turned 40 that there was a realization that I was going to break if I didn't give myself something outside of work. My family were, of course, always there and hugely supportive. But my time was absolutely 100% committed to work. And it's very rare that my brain ever switches off from work. Even in the most organised arrangements, I'm still thinking alongside my day-to-day. And I tried a few different things. One of them was horse riding, which I'm scared of horses, so it was quite the challenge.
That's ambitious, then.
It was ambitious. And I also tried rock climbing. And I found that rock climbing absolutely cleared my mind.
So wait a minute, you only started rock climbing at the age of 39 and a half?
Yeah. I was about 39 to be accurate, but yeah, I started then, and I found that the focus that you needed to get good at it was all-encompassing. It took every ounce of my mental capacity to be able to get good at climbing, and it freed my mind from work. So as soon as I'm pootling up some climb, my brain suddenly starts flicking off onto other things. I'm not really pushing. So if I really have had a stressful day, I can go climbing with my wife. I'll get on some hard climbs, and that's it. I can't focus on anything else, otherwise I'll fall off, which isn't a good thing. It's not bad, but it's not the worst. And you go through, and your mind becomes focused on that. When you come away, it's like I've relaxed. My brain's relaxed. It's given me that opportunity.
The one thing I'm worrying, and I'm struggling with, and I think everybody listening to this podcast will be the same thing. So one day you went home and you said to your wife, right, we're off rock climbing. What did she say to that?
Well, it was really interesting, actually, because my wife was horse riding when I also started horse riding. And then I started climbing, and I started climbing more and more and more. And my wife started learning to climb because she realised she was going to be a widow to to climbing. She was never going to see me, a bit like the golf widows as they describe them.
Right.
And she joined in, and she actually is as addicted or passionate about climbing as I am. So we go often, both indoor and outdoor. But yeah, we climb together.
Fantastic thing to share, must be.
Very much so. Yeah, it's a great shared experience.
Great stuff. And so finally, you're obviously very familiar with the Nottingham Business School. You know all about it. What one piece of leadership advice might you give to the people there, if I was to say something you've picked up on your way?
Make sure you do have your space. That is one of the things. Like I could have gone down the wrong hole. It was very, very close with the spiraling into work, and there was a little bit of alcohol that was involved in supporting that process as well. It could have gone the wrong way. Look after yourself. It's the most important. You are the most important. You are the asset. If you are going to be the leader of the business, don't forget, you are one of those key assets. You're important to the business and its success. Through its transitional period, you will need to be there. So don't forget about looking after you. It's so important.
So look after yourself and your leadership will follow.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. Rob Swann, thanks very, very much for joining us here for this episode of the Nottingham Business School Business Leaders Podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, then why not check out some of the others that are also available, including those with the chair of the FA, Debbie Hewitt, England Women's Rugby World Cup winner Maggie Alfonsi, MBE, and the Vice-Chancellor of Nottingham Trent University, Professor Edward Peck, CBE. The Nottingham Business School Business Leaders Podcast is produced for Nottingham Trent University by Celtic Tiger Productions. Your presenter was Mike Sassy, and your producer was John Collins.